You know that person, the one who barely speaks in meetings, never argues, never explains themselves. And somehow, they get everything they want. Most people think silence is what you do when you have nothing to say. They're wrong. Silence is a weapon. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how to use it. There's something that happens in every conversation, every negotiation, every social situation, and almost nobody notices it. The person who fills silence first loses. Think about the last time someone didn't respond to your text right away. What happened inside your head? You started explaining yourself before they even asked. You softened your position. You gave ground. They didn't do anything. And it worked. Here's what society got backwards. We were raised to believe silence is awkward, that you need to fill it, that not talking means you're shy, nervous, or, worst of all, that you have nothing to offer. But neuroscience tells a different story. When you go quiet in a charged moment, you don't just pause the conversation. You restructure it. You force the other person's brain to do something it's not used to, wait for input that never comes. And while they're waiting, their threat response activates. Their anxiety creeps in. They start projecting. And suddenly, you're not reacting to them. They're reacting to you. Let's get specific, because just be quiet is useless advice. There are actually 3 distinct types of silence that work in completely different ways. And most people accidentally use the wrong one. The first, strategic delay. This is the pause before you answer. Not because you don't know, but because you're choosing when to speak. High-level negotiators use this constantly. You get asked something, and instead of jumping in, you breathe. You look away slightly. You take your time. The other person reads this as depth, confidence, certainty. They start to wonder if maybe they should take your answer more seriously before it even leaves your mouth. The second, the withheld reaction. Someone does something to provoke you. An insult, a dig, a quiet manipulation. And you give them nothing. No expression. No flinch. No words. This one is brutal because it denies them the loop. Every provocation is designed to get a reaction because a reaction gives information. It shows what matters to you. It tells them where your edges are. When you go blank, they have nothing to work with. And they know it. The third, deliberate absence. This is the most advanced one. Not withdrawing in anger, but strategically becoming less available. Fewer updates. Fewer check-ins. Less presence in spaces where you used to be loud. People notice absence more than they notice presence. It's the contrast that registers in the brain. When you suddenly become quieter in a relationship, professional or personal, people start asking questions they never asked before. Is everything okay? What's going on with them? Do they still care about this? You haven't said a word, but you've said everything. Here's what I want you to understand about why this works at a deeper level. Human beings evolved in social groups where silence carried enormous meaning. A sudden quiet in the forest meant danger. A quiet from a trusted person meant something was wrong. Our brains are wired to treat silence as data, often more urgent data than words. Words are easy to control. Silence is harder to fake. There's a concept called the expectancy violation effect. When people expect you to react, to defend, to justify, to fill the space, and you don't, their mental model of you breaks. They have to rebuild it from scratch. And while they're rebuilding, you're already 3 steps ahead. Think about people you've admired, the ones who seemed impossible to read, the ones who never seemed rattled, who spoke rarely, but when they did, the room shifted. That wasn't charisma you were sensing. That was control, specifically, the kind of control that comes from choosing not to perform. Most people are performing constantly. They need the room to know they're smart, funny, capable. They need the laugh. They need the nod. And that need, that desperate little need to be understood, is exactly where they're most vulnerable. Silence removes that vulnerability entirely. But let me push back on myself for a second, because this can go wrong. Silence used badly becomes avoidance. It becomes emotional withdrawal. It punishes people instead of protecting you. There's a version of this that isn't strategic. It's just fear. Fear of being seen. Fear of saying the wrong thing. Fear of the conversation itself. That kind of silence doesn't create power. It creates distance. and eventually, disconnection. So how do you tell the difference? It comes down to the feeling underneath it. Strategic silence feels calm. Chosen. Deliberate. Fear-based silence feels tight. Reactive. Shameful. If your silence is rooted in fear, the work is different. But if it's rooted in intention, in the full awareness that not every moment needs your voice, that's where things get interesting. Here's the part most people never get to. Silence doesn't just change how others perceive you. It changes how you perceive yourself. When you stop filling every moment with noise, with talking, explaining, defending, performing, something happens in the background of your mind. You start to hear yourself think. Actually think. Not react. Not perform. Think. The people who are most certain of who they are, they're usually the quietest about it. Because they're not trying to convince you. They don't need to. There's an old Japanese concept called ma, roughly translated as the space between things. The pause. The gap. Musicians understand this. The notes you don't play are just as important as the ones you do. The space between the beats is where the rhythm actually lives. You are the music, but you've been afraid of the rests. Start treating your silence like you treat your best sentences, intentionally, specifically, with the full awareness that sometimes saying nothing is the most powerful thing you could possibly do. In a world that rewards the loudest voice in the room, the person who masters silence becomes something rare, not mysterious for its own sake, not cold, but centered, unreadable, and because of that, genuinely free. Free from the need to justify, free from the compulsion to explain, free from the exhausting, endless performance of being understood. You don't have to prove anything to a room you're choosing not to speak in. So, that person at the beginning, the one who barely speaks, never argues, always seems to get what they want. Now you know what they know. Try this for just 1 week. In one conversation per day, pick a moment where you'd normally explain yourself, defend yourself, or fill the silence. And don't. Just let it sit. Watch what happens on the other side of that pause. You might be surprised at what speaks for you. If this hit differently than you expected, that means it was working. Like and save it for the version of you that needs to hear it again. See you in the next one.